guys, welcome to the chapter on being present. This is one of my favorites again. A good quote from a great book. The book is called Good Vibes, Good Life by Vex King. Again, it's got a lot of open thoughts and concept in it, but it's got some good nuggets in it. And the quote is this: the moment you take responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you can change anything in your life. Love that. Great book. Got a lot of good stuff in it. So again, just for clarity, people use a lot of different words when it comes to synonyms with being present, being conscious, mindful, awareness. But I'm going to go through and explain the differences that I use for being present and being conscious. Again, these are universal terms. A lot of times you'll hear these in like Eastern religion, but they're not bad terms. These are terms that you can use for yourself. Don't do some research. They're very useful and very practical. They're not weird or out there unless you make them that way. So I'm going to explain to you how I use them and how they've been such a help to me. Being present, how I'm using it in this chapter for this book, it means accepting a moment as it's happening without judgment or resistance. Now, this was a huge thing that I dealt with, that if things were not like I needed them to be, I had anxiety. I would have anger. I would just get so wound up, and it's like, you don't have to do that. I didn't realize you had a choice in whether or not you allow that to happen at all or just to minimize the level of it. I know I had a lot of anticipation anxiety. If I was going to an event to a thing, I would just start creating like this resistance to it. I didn't want to go, and all these people would be there, and I would just get angry within myself, and ultimately it would spill out in the words and the actions, usually with my wife, April, who was the awesome beneficiary of all that stuff. I would resist things when they weren't like I needed them to be or wanted them to be. I had to have things a certain way. And so one of the things that I realized in my journey of introspection is that I was very unintentionally selfish. I was a very selfish-minded person. I wasn't meaning to be that way, but that's how it would play out. April got to where she had to make sure she was protecting me and isolating me from certain situations so that I just wouldn't get, and that's not her job. That's not her role to try to mother me. I need to be a man, be a big boy, and learn to self-soothe, self-control, which is a gift of the Spirit. So, a fruit of the Spirit, rather. Sorry. So this is what this chapter really is walking into certain situations that you have no control over or little, and learning how to be okay with the people and the things. If they're not like you want, it's okay. You don't have to give capital into the situation. You can train yourself and your mind and your body's feelings to not get caught up in something that's not exactly like you want. And so this was very helpful to me. This was this took a long time for me. It doesn't take everyone a long time, but for me, it took a little while for this to settle. But once it did, it was so helpful that when I encountered people and situations that weren't like I thought they were going to be or that I wanted them to be, I didn't have to react to it. I had a choice. I could just be present. I could be mindful in that moment, like, hey, this person, I don't like what they're saying, or I don't like their tone, but I don't have to engage in it. I have a choice of whether I want to or not. So in the past, I would take circumstances that were happening to me personally, as though the circumstances were intentionally happening and they were negative and they wouldn't go the way I wanted them to go. So I let that dictate my quality of life daily. And what I learned is I don't have to do that. The other people are thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about me. They're not intentionally trying to make me have a bad day or a bad time in this event. They're thinking about themselves. I was the one responsible for how I felt. And taking responsibility for that and learning how to process through it and how to manage myself. I can't stress to you how valuable that asset is. That's a big deal. So when you don't know how to cope with it in a healthy way, what it leads to, especially in my situation, was coping negatively. And people do that in different ways. They can use work as a coping mechanism negatively, hobbies, sex, alcohol, drugs. And so a deep, unhealthy coping can lead to addiction, which is what happened to me for almost 20 years. I had no knowledge of all this stuff, and I wasn't putting the work in. All I knew was that when I used pills to cope, that they just shut the voices off. And I had just a few moments of synthetic peace. It wasn't real peace. It was this alternate version that I associated with being, this must be what peace felt like. And it was a lie. And it's a spiritual thing too. And the enemy would then step in immediately and use that to try to push me further down that hole that at the very beginning of this book talks about that you have to claw your way out of. And it's bloody, it's messy, it can be ugly at times. And so I used coping as addiction for my coping as a way to suppress a lot of what some people would say would be mild trauma in my childhood. I've obviously heard people's stories that were way worse than mine, but the ones I experienced probably most likely led me to cope with my emotions in a way as a young child that were unhealthy. I felt like I didn't or couldn't talk to anyone about it because it was like not good. And so I just held all that in. I never dealt with it. And so ultimately in my 20s, I discovered pain pills that would suppress that negative feelings for like an hour or so. And then after that wore off, I would even sink a little deeper. And that just went on for a really long time. And so going to a men's retreat, I discovered all that and I was able to get all that out and begin my journey. That was the beginning for me. And ultimately, at some point after that, I began to read books about being present, being conscious, being mindful. And I realized that as these things happening, I don't have to give in to those. If a situation or a moment is either I feel like it's not going to be the way I want it to be, or it didn't go the way I want it to go, or presently it's happening in a way that I don't like, I don't have to give in to that and let that dictate my level of joy or peace in that moment. Being mindful and being present, I recognize it with my mindfulness, and then my present tool allows me to go, okay, here's what's happening. And do I want to engage in this conversation in this way with this person that's not going like I want it to go? And I have a say-so. I have a fruit of the Spirit called self-control that it gives me a say-so in that. So being aware lets us live our life based on values, and being conscious lets us know when something is in our control and when it isn't. And it's when it's out of our control that we usually can feel a lot of that negativity, but you don't have to. You have a choice. And I have a paragraph in there that says, if all you get out of this book is this particular premise, it could remove a decent amount of pain and suffering from your life. The concept slowly adds an element of control to living, while it removes control from other variables that should have never had any say-so to begin with. That's a strong concept. And if you can just apply that one concept into your life, knowing that you don't have to give in or engage into the anxiety of walking into a future situation, or you're in a present situation, or a situation has already happened, you can minimize or determine the level at which that impacts your life. And that's about being present in the moment. I don't have to engage in that. That person's bringing up a topic I don't want to talk about. I can excuse myself out of the conversation. If what they're talking about is bringing up, angering me, my mindfulness catches it, and then I can make the decision to whether or not or how I want to progress further. I can opt out, or I can just change the way in what I'm saying. That's what the rest of that paragraph talks about there. And then on resistance and attachment. That is the opposite of being present and conscious. We've talked a little bit about this already. Resistance happens when a situation or circumstance isn't what we want it to be, and so we resist it. It can be a person, a place, a conversation. It generates negative thoughts with us. It generates negative feelings. It generates negative emotions. And attachment is when we have to have a situation or circumstance be a certain way. Attachment says this person has to be like this. This person can't talk about this or I'm going to get upset. I'm attached to this being a certain way. And when it's not, I resist it. So we learn through being present that we can let go of resisting when things aren't going a certain way. And we can let go of having to have certain things a certain way through attachment. Hopefully that's translating like it reads here. We don't have to have things a certain way. And when they're not, we don't have to resist it. We can choose through our mindfulness of recognizing it and then being present in it on what to do. We can only manage ourselves. We can't manage our spouses, our children, our parents, our work, our co-workers, or the people. We can't control all those. We can only control our response. So it comes down to who we really are, who we want to be, and we don't waste time engaging in things we have no control over. We let go of attachment. Things don't have to be a certain way all the time. We can want them to be, but they don't have to be. And we don't have to react negatively when they aren't. And then we don't have to resist everything. We don't have to give up our control of ourselves just because a person, a situation, or place or thing is not going like we want it to. So there's some great questions there. There's some place for you to write down some thoughts. I hope you got some good ones, and we'll see you on the next chapter.